Are you overwhelmed by the challenge of personalizing communication for thousands of students? That's where Element 451's AI assistants come in. From nudging prospective students to guiding those already on their journey, AI assistants don't just automate, they write, build, and optimize every step of your digital campaigns. Discover how at element451.com/AI team.
Welcome to Mastering the Next, a cutting-edge podcast that explores the future of graduate, online, and non-traditional education through the lens of AI and technology. I'm your host, Dr. Ray Lutsky, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Element 451. Join me for discussions with some of the thought leaders shaping the future of graduate enrollment management through technology. Mastering the Next is a part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that helps institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.
In this episode of Mastering the Next, we'll explore the future of accessibility and neurodiversity in graduate education with Dr. Kimberly White-Smith, Dean of the School of Leadership and Education Sciences, also known as SOLS, at the University of San Diego. Dr. White-Smith will share her thoughts on how institutions can better support neurodiverse learners and foster inclusivity within their programs, and what SOLS is doing to support the education of these students. Thank you for joining us to talk about this important topic, Dr. White-Smith.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
This is an important topic of discussion for me personally, as well as someone with adult ADHD who serves as a faculty member at another institution. So I'm really excited to be speaking with you. I'm curious, what's next for the School of Leadership and Education Sciences at USD in promoting inclusivity for neurodiverse learners?
Yes. So we are making it part of our mission and our goal to provide holistic supports for not just for our students, that goes without saying, but also for those who are interested in seeking graduate education experiences. So many times adults are turned off from even dreaming about getting a master's degree or a doctoral degree because of whatever uncomfortability has happened as a result of the education system that they've had experiences with, and coming to know more about their own learning and neurodiversity, whether it's ADHD, ADD, dyslexia. Sometimes this presents challenges in graduate education because, quite honestly, higher ed is behind in really thinking about what it needs to do and how it needs to transform itself to be accessible to all learners.
So, from your perspective as an educational leader, as a faculty member, how should institutions be supporting neurodiverse students across the board beyond just program specifics or initiatives? You mentioned we're behind the eight ball. What should be happening?
Yeah. So one of the things that my team is engaged in is looking at the process from being interested in graduate education all the way through to your experience within the program, with the learning and teaching process, all the way through graduation. And so one small thing, when you think about holistic accessibility, it has to start at the very beginning. So first of all, making our open houses or our workshops at the very beginning, not just talking heads talking at you about our different programs. One of the things that we've tried to do is we've transformed our open houses or our learning workshops into actual application workshops. So we're talking about first generation graduate students. We're talking about students who have different learning differences. And so even just going through the application process and really understanding what they're asking for in that question sometimes is daunting. And so we try to demystify this by actually having an application workshop where we go through the questions, we go through the process. So this not only helps better prepare them to build stronger applications, right? Because we all get to access the navigational capital necessary for doing this. Whether we've had family members who have taken advantage of higher ed or not, this really helps to really level the playing field. But also, as a part of this process, you're interacting with staff, you're interacting with faculty. So it's also developing your interviewing skills. So hopefully you'll come and be with us here at Souls, but regardless, you'll be better as a result of going through our process that helps to build you up as you go through your searching process for what's the next steps for you. So that's one aspect. Another aspect that we've been working through is actually developing a student success hub, right? And so a lot of times graduate schools are really disjointed from the rest of the university campus. That's pretty much the standard model. And what we're trying to do is to actually bridge the gap. One place for graduate students to come and get writing supports. Writing in graduate school is very different than writing in the real world. Most of our students are adult learners. So they have families, they have careers. And so getting back in the saddle and figuring out how to write academically, right, can be a challenge. So writing supports. We also have all of our advisors, some of our folks are getting actual certifications, whether it is a degree in marriage and family therapy, school counseling, whether it is teaching, high school teachers, elementary school teachers, bilingual teachers. So our credential analysts, all of those individuals are in our Student Success Hub. So it's not a mystery where to go to get financial aid or to get supports that you need. It's all right there under our director, Rachel Martinez.
It's incredible. It's like a network of supports. Do you see that as a trend, or would you say that this is something new? Do you see other institutions thinking about something like a success hub, or really taking a good look at their application process and saying, how are we facilitating different kinds of learners, whether they're first generation or neurodiverse? Is this a trend you're seeing?
So, that's a very interesting question. Even before the pandemic in higher ed, we were predicting that there would be an enrollment cliff, because the students that are now coming into higher ed, right, would have been born around the time we had the depression in the early 2000s. And so folks just had less children then. So the pool of traditional age undergraduates is just smaller than it has been in years past, right? So we already knew that was coming. Colleges and universities have been rallying around different ways in which they could look at enrollment differently. So you'll see a lot of universities now who are revamping themselves in order to meet the needs of more Latinx students, for instance, because they are a growing demographic across the country, especially here on the West Coast, right, in California. So you'll see even the University of San Diego is an emerging Hispanic serving institution. And so when you want to develop a radically welcoming environment for students who have been traditionally underserved, you have to think about what are the changes that you need to make in your ecosystem so that they know not only are they welcomed here, that they belong here, but that we are being considerate of their needs, their cultural ways of being, and celebrate that, right? So that is one aspect that has caused higher ed to kind of make changes. The second growing demographic in the country is the adult learner. And with that, we are also finding folks who have been impacted by the pandemic. What we're learning through neuroscience and neurobiology is that folks who have experienced trauma, their brains mirror folks who have learning differences. We're also learning from the science, right, that folks with learning differences, that they are just that, they're differences. They're not obstacles to learning because of the way that we have traditionally taught in schools, that creates the obstacles. So if we reorient the learning and teaching experiences around the great strengths and the assets that these folks bring, we could really elevate their own internal genius. So when you look in our society and people point, oh my gosh, Richard Branson, oh my gosh, all of these folks who are change makers, who are thinking differently, doing things outside of the box, guess what? I bet you, if you looked into their academic history, you would find that they experienced some form of learning difference. Richard Branson proudly talks about how he is dyslexic and how that has really elevated the way that he thinks about the world. And so we're learning more about the assets that all of our students bring from all of our various communities and honoring that. And so I am finding it is a trend in higher ed, but not to the same degree that I'd like to see it, right? So we really have not focused on neurodiversity per se, right? We really haven't taken the time to look at the neuroscience, to look at what we're learning from neurobiology, and really integrated it into changing the way that higher ed delivers academic supports and learning opportunities.
It is interesting to think about how traditionally underserved and indeed overlooked, as you're pointing out, these learners have been. And looking at the focus of the school which you lead as dean and the discipline of graduate education for educating teachers and marriage and family therapists and all kinds of folks who are going to be in those types of roles, how do you think the broader field of education can ensure that these programs are accessible to all kinds of learners?
We've been working a lot with our local school districts in dreaming and learning together the ways that we can create pathways of success. If you look at the history of education here in the US, we have done some things that I think that we really need to stand back and take a look at. In 2004, Congress recognized that we had a serious misrepresentation or mislabeling of African American students. They recognized that. They looked at the overgeneralization of these particular groups and, made a statement about how we needed to do something about that. Black students are the most impacted. The next largest impacted group is our Indigenous Americans or our Native Indian population, and then our Latinx population increasingly has become overrepresented with these amorphous labels that are based on behavior as opposed to digging down to the real challenge, which we might find to be in the neurodiversity realm of learning differences. And so this pattern of mislabeling children is something that persists today. Some of the research calls it the school to prison pipeline, because we find that when we mislabel these kids and we put them on a trajectory where they're pulled away from academic supports and content, that they continue to decline over the years. And that leads to engagement in activity that leads to prison. And so we want to build pathways of success. We want to think about the behaviors of the adults in the room, right? in the ways that we recognize or don't recognize the brilliance of our children. I'll give you a real quick example. Dr. Nikki Elliott, who is our director of our Center for Embodied Equity and Neurodiversity. And she was working with a group of teachers, and she realized that the teachers themselves had experienced a lot of trauma in their lives and probably had their own triggers when they went into the classrooms. And so she worked with the teachers first to help them assess their neurodiversity, the ways they learn, their anxiety, right? The things that they have stored in their body over the years. These things are the things that drove them into teaching in the first place because they wanted to make sure that no other kid endured what they did. But they are recounting the same behaviors, right, that disadvantage our students. So, quick example. Teacher was like, oh, this kid, Tyler, he is just awful, and I have to keep sending him out of the classroom because he keeps disrupting. Well, what is he doing? Oh, he keeps getting up and he sharpens his pencil for no reason. Okay, so let's breathe, let's calm down, let's develop some strategies to find out what happens before he breaks the pencil. Okay. All right, I've been examining Tyler and I see that he's holding the pencil incorrectly. Oh, well, what can we do about that? Well, let me try to teach him how to hold it correctly. Okay, so now she's teaching him how to hold it correctly. Oh, wait a second. There's something wrong with his hand. What's going on? Well, what do you think you should do? Well, let's call in the occupational therapist. The therapist comes in after some examination. They realize that Tyler had a muscular issue in his hand and that he wasn't intentionally breaking the pencils. He just couldn't hold the pencil with enough strength to write. And so when he would force it, he would break the pencil. And she's like, oh my God, I have been sending this boy out of the classroom, away from the academic content, to the principal's office where he was being punished, right, for something that was not related to behavior and had everything to do with what our responsibilities are as teachers, which is to uncover what are the supports that our students need so that their brilliance can shine, right? And so this is the type of work that we're doing now with the center. This is the type of work that we're doing with the Black and Genius initiatives here in San Diego. We work with all of the school districts across the region. San Diego Unified and Spring Valley La Mesa are kind of our two biggest school districts that we work with. And we represent children from about 10 different cultural, ethnic backgrounds. They speak about 8 different languages. This idea of examining what we have done in the past that have disadvantaged these students and really honing in on the beauty and the brilliance that these communities, that their caregivers, that they themselves exhibit, really has been the focus of our work moving forward. It has been what has guided the changes that we have made in our graduate programs and building this, what we call radical welcoming ecosystem.
Wow. So much to unpack there. And what an incredible story about that student and how their needs weren't being addressed. And as a result, they were seen as a disruptive influence and just put in a place where they wouldn't be successful. It's truly a remarkable story. I'm curious, in addition to the supports that you've mentioned, if there are ways that the school, the university are integrating technology to help adapt to the needs of these learners. For example, with online learning, understanding that certain learners don't do as well in that environment, and then others actually excel in an environment where there's more independence. I'm just curious what impact you've observed on student engagement and success through the use of technology.
Absolutely. I'm the mom of a neurodivergent learner myself, and my kiddo was in high school during the pandemic. And it's interesting because with so much pain that happened during the pandemic times, there was also some really interesting learning opportunities that came from that. My kiddo thrived during the pandemic with online learning. online learning for my dyslexic kid really kind of changed the game for her, and taking ownership of her learning through using technology to support. So this is a lesson that I have kept with me as I journeyed through my leadership experiences. And at the University of San Diego, the School of Leadership and Education Sciences, one of the things that we did early on in my deanship was hire a senior instructional technologist. And so Dr. Sweat, our instructional technologist, really kind of helps to, keep that Northern Star for us lit. So when we put together modules and we use Canvas, are we using all the accessibility tools that's built into the system? And if not, he will train us on how to use those. Using speech to text, text to speech technologies for our students who need that extra support due to language learning differences. All of these elements, creating digital webinars for our students, flipped classrooms where they can actually take in the content before the class using different types of technology, and then coming to class in person and having conversations so that I have twice the access to the learning materials, right? Both by myself, going through all of the different types of digital technologies, and then having communication with my peers and talking through it so I can have a better, more nuanced understanding of what we're studying. So having our own in-house instructional technologist has really changed the game in the way that we imagine learning. We also have been building more online program. So we have fully online PhD in social justice that has really taken off. And folks who, want to learn more about how to create more socially equitable and just societies, workplaces are coming to us to get that learning, and being able to use a variety of digital technological tools is really important in sustaining engagement, right, and learning. We very recently have opened up a new doctorate in education in organizational leadership, which will be also accessible online and with some in-person hybrid experiences. So we have really taken to heart the learning opportunities that we experienced through the COVID pandemic and integrated that within new and developing programs.
It's interesting. I'd love to double click on something that you just mentioned. It's a little bit off script, but the idea that all these new kinds of programs through different modalities, particularly at the graduate level, really speaks to the idea that there is this new traditional learner out there, that the traditional learner in the sense of a university is sort of not the case anymore. And there's this new paradigm. I'm just curious to hear from your perspective how you would define the new traditional learner, if you will, given that you're building programs like you are, and you're building online programs, and you're focusing on specific needs of students at the graduate level, their backgrounds, their diversity in many ways. How do you see that traditional student idea changing?
Being the leader of souls has really broadened my experience, because we have, the mental health component, we have the teaching component, and we have leadership. But leadership broadly defined, we also have what we call the Nonprofit Institute. And the Nonprofit Institute is a resource for our local and regional and state nonprofits. They talk about philanthropy, they discuss how to build boards. And so it's interesting because, when I started out in education, it's been almost 30 years ago that I was, actually it's 30 years ago today, I was a kindergarten teacher.
Wow.
30 years ago, this year, I was a kindergarten teacher. So back in the day, I sound like my grandma. Back in the day when I was born, we used to walk. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, traditional education, schools and colleges just focused on one aspect of the community, right? That is the school community. The beautiful thing about Souls is that it really represents the entire community. So, for instance, when we are working with the Big E students, we are also engaging with their parents, right? These are folks who are like, wow, I have never been to the University of San Diego. This is an amazing experience. Asking them, what are some things you want to learn? What are some things you want us to bring to the experience, right? And we are kind of co-creating this learning experience for their parents while they are off working with our wonderful Jacobs Institute and the beautiful NSBE undergraduate students in our engineering school. The parents are getting together and they're co-creating their own learning experience, right? And so we bring in some of the nonprofits that we're working with. So these are entities that also provide services for some of our students, right? Some of our students are in foster care. Some of our students experience family differently. They're being raised by grandparents, aunts, uncles. And so it's really kind of broadened this perspective of traditional learner because we're educating parents. They're helping us help them learn how to better advocate for their student. So not only are we working with schools and helping them to recreate ecosystems of support, not only are we working with the kids to be self-advocates, we're also working with their caregivers so that they too can advocate for their child, but guess what? For themselves, right? And so I think today's learner, the world is wide open, right? And I believe that technological supports in education allows access to so many different things that folks, I grew up in South Central Los Angeles, and I knew nothing about college when I was growing up. And in fact, my first experience with college was going to see the Spike Lee movie School Days. And I was like, oh, is that what college is? I want to go and do that. That looks so cool. And so going from opportunities where they're very limited to in your own home, if you have access to technology, really being exposed to so many new and different things that could be exciting, could be fun. And so, yeah, the new learner today is someone who I feel has so much potential. I think it also rests with those of us who are the gatekeepers, right, to these experiences. The onus is on us, right, to do things differently. And so it's a calling that we are answering.
I think it's a perfect place to leave our conversation because it just speaks to the future, and excited to have this chat with you and looking forward to seeing what happens next at Souls. Dr. Kimberly White-Smith, Dean of the School of Leadership and Education Sciences at the University of San Diego. Thanks for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Ray.
The Mastering the Next podcast is a part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Artis Cadieux, J.C. Bonilla, Mallory Wilsey, Brendan Henkel, Brian Gross, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.